Welcome back to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with the industry's biggest names. As always, I'm your host, Alan Seals, and our wonderful, wonderful guest today is a longtime friend of mine, Ilana Levine, who is just this amazing human, and I've been working with her off and on for years in various podcasting projects, and we've always talked about having her on my podcast, and we were going to do it, and then the pandemic hit, and things just went haywire, but now we actually made it happen, so I am really excited to share this conversation with you. And full disclosure, it's actually kind of awkward for me to interview people that I already know. I don't quite know why. I don't quite know why that is, but we had a good time anyway. I actually have a much easier time asking weird questions to people I don't know. So take that for whatever it means. I don't know. Find me on all the socials, leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening now, and everybody please enjoy this episode with Ilana Levine.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
My guest today may be best known to my musical theater audience for her role as Lucy Van Pelt in the Broadway revival of the musical You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. She also starred in the Broadway production of Jake's Women, Wrong Mountain, and The Last Night of Ballyhoo, in addition to performing at the Tony Awards and her amazing guest appearance on the infamous episode of Seinfeld called The Contest. She has appeared in many television shows and films, including Law & Order, Tanner on Tanner, Damages, Failure to Launch, The Nanny Diaries, Friends with Kids, Five Fights Up, and so many more. I gotta stop now or I'd be here all day. In May of 2016, she joined the podcast universe when she began hosting Little Known Facts with Ilana Levine. And she also hosts the podcasts called And the Award Goes To and How to Be More Chill for the Broadway Podcast Network. I already gave it away. Ilana Levine, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Alan, I've been waiting and waiting for this invitation, and finally it has happened. Thank you.
We talked about this. You're welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. I remember, we talked about this pre-pandemic, and then the world went to shit, and then we've been working together on the other two podcasts, How to Be More Chill and The Award Goes To, for a couple of years now. And so now it's just like, oh yeah, we never actually made this happen. So here we are. I am so happy to have you in this capacity because we've hung out for a long time. We see shows together, we work together, and now I get to actually sit down with you uninterrupted and learn what makes you tick. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Well, little Ilana, take us back to what got you into the theatre? What was your touchstone? Do you have a moment when you're like, this is for me, this is where I needed to go here?
I definitely had a touchstone in terms of this is for me. I will always be the happiest audience member anytime I walk into a theater ever. So my childhood was about the appreciation of the arts. I was in no way someone who performed in the arts. But my family had the great benefit. We lived in New Jersey, so we could drive over the George Washington Bridge, and Broadway was right there. And my mom grew up in Brooklyn, was a passionate theater lover, and really, like, anytime something momentous or glorious happened in our lives, a Broadway show was how we got to celebrate. Wow. And this was, it didn't matter what seat it was, and it didn't matter if it were a musical or a straight play. My mother really opened up the world of theater to me. They're reviving Camelot. I keep remembering listening to Camelot on a record in my house. That was one of her favorite musicals. She saw the original. So my absolute love and awe for the arts and getting to see a Broadway show, that was born out of my mom's infectious passion for it. And then, I've told this story before, so I'll tell a very truncated version of it. I was getting a haircut when I was about to be a freshman in college, and there was one of the most handsome people cutting my hair and doing a blow dry, and his name was Bruno Rondinelli. And Bruno, when he wasn't like Warren Beatty from Shampoo vibes, was writing a play. And he had, in the salon, everyone has their station, and on his little shelf were, hairbrushes and hair products and this script. And so I guess at some point I picked it up. This was not a girl who'd ever done a play. I didn't know what a Samuel French play would look like. I certainly had read plays in high school in big anthologies and collections of playwrights, but seeing like a script like this was brand new. And I guess I was in love with Bruno. And to try to, I don't know what I was doing, I started reading his play out loud. And he was excited to hear his words read back to him. And he was like, you know what? You're really good at reading, at cold readings. Did not know what a cold reading was, but I was like, thank you. Um, and from there, 5 hours later, I ended up going to his acting studio in New York City that allowed people to audit for free Wednesday nights once a month. This was the Terry Schreiber Studios, an acting studio in New York City. And that's how it all began. I walked into a room where people were doing emotional recall exercises, and someone did this thing where using like the furniture that you have in an acting class, like, like two cartons to make a couch and something else made a refrigerator. I don't know. She made a room, and then this girl came out on stage in like business attire. She kind of kept walking on and off the stage, coming back in various forms of like post work clothes, like sweatpants and her blazer. And then she came back again fully in her like couch potato clothes and mimes turning on a TV. And then she goes to the refrigerator that she made out of, cardboard boxes. And from the back of the refrigerator takes a baby bottle and sits on the couch and proceeds to drink from a baby bottle. And that was her, I'm sorry, it was a private moment exercise, not an emotional recall, private moment. So this was someone sharing with the class that when she comes home after work, her private moment is to drink out of a baby bottle. So A, this was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, right? B, what? And C, the most remarkable part of all of it, and many, people did all sorts of things that day, but I remember listening to the feedback that she got and how the teacher sort of led the conversation, and it was the most empathetic, kind, generous, fascinating post-scene work discussion. I mean, I'm 18 years old. I'm from Teaneck. I don't know what's happening, except that I was in a room with the most generous, beautiful people who watched this thing where honestly, I didn't know whether to giggle or cry. I did not know or get help. Like, I didn't know what to do watching this thing. And I very much learned, like, that's what it is to be brave. I mean, truly, there are very few more intimate things that anyone could share with a therapist, let alone a room full of strangers, including auditors like me, right? Like, it wasn't. Anyway, I could go on and on about that night. And that actress.
And now we know her as.
No, but honestly, so Bruno, haircut, reading his play, that class, everything in my life changed from that moment on. And I didn't know that I was going to end up doing this professionally, but I knew that I wanted to start being in these kinds of rooms.
That's incredible that you just took one one evening of chance after chance and just went with it. And a fresh college 18-year-old who's gone, who didn't even know you wanted to do this, goes to this class where one of the objectively speaking weirdest things that you could see is happening that night. And instead of running and being like, I don't want anything to do with this, you fully dove in. And so I guess back up a second. Number one, did you and Bruno ever have a moment? Did that ever come to fruition?
No. So no. Bruno ended up, I don't think he came to a class again after. I mean, I feel like I know that he still has a salon, and I know that randomly he and a cousin of mine were in some poker tournament recently, and this huge full circle moment happened where I get a text from my cousin saying, I just folded and Bruno Rondinelli, won the pot, like something like that. So no, I think he was a real artist, and it turned out that hair artistry became the thing that he committed to. But yeah, and so much happened since then. But needless to say, I was like a marketing business major, and I just everything recalibrated and reshifted, and yeah,
That's what I was going
I
to ask of what you
started
were
studying acting.
originally going to school for. So did you switch schools or you were able to do this?
I hadn't started, right? It was the summer before I was about
Wow.
to start college. I went to orientation at the university that I had been accepted at, and as my mom reminds me, I barely remember the story, but like 2 hours into orientation, I was like, I'm coming home. I'm not going here. And yeah, and so I ended up applying to NYU and Fordham University. Fordham because I had like read somewhere that Denzel Washington and Patricia Clarkson had gone there. Um, I didn't even know it was a Jesuit university, and how beautiful that would be as part of the academics there. And anyway, I got into NYU and I got into Fordham, and Fordham helped me financially go to their school. I think they were like, Levine, we don't have any of you. Come on in. We'll give you. And NYU was like, we have 7,000 Levines. Anyway, and that ended up being a really remarkable place to go to school, as it turned out. And when I came into school, John Hickey was a senior, John Benjamin Hickey,
Hmm.
but we had a class together, and he became my first friend, like my first actor friend, and to this day remains my most beloved, cherished friend. But yeah, so I ended up studying theater. I was a theater major there.
I want to jump ahead because you just mentioned John Benjamin Hickey. He's been a guest on And the Award Goes To, which is, the podcast that we're currently releasing season 3 of. And it's fascinating to me when we're talking about like, oh yeah, I'm texting Harvey Firestein. I'm texting Allison Janney. Like, you are legitimately friends with all of these people and you've been friends with them for forever. And like
Decades.
Jason
Yeah.
yeah, decades and decades, and Jason Alexander and all these just amazing people that you've just kept up with. And I guess kind of falling down that path a little bit is, well, I guess in the bio, right? So we
Is
said that
texting your passion?
is texting my pet. Yes. Did you
No, I thought you were
only
gonna say,
text?
so
Is
you
that all
text a
you
lot of
ever
people.
do? Did you text a
I
lot of
love to
people?
text.
Because you only
Yeah.
call me. No. No, I guess the thing about it, I guess what I'm getting into is like you've been fortunate enough to work with such amazing people, and maybe it's I'm trying to figure out where my question is formulating here, because the people who have been in the business for these decades, and for people of a certain age, right, who are still with it, are who haven't given up or who haven't gone on to do something else or even recently
Yeah.
left the business during the pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
so many people are still such a close knit community, and I mean, do you see that on your side of the world and in your environment too? If you're just like you did You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown with with BD Wong and Roger Bart and Kristen Chenoweth and Anthony Rapp and Chris and Stanley Mathis, right? So all of these people went on to such amazing things, yourself included, and I don't know, like, do you see what I'm getting at? All of you sort of moved through this iconic point together and have become these icons in the industry. And is that a club that you realize that was really hard to get into at the time? Is it like looking at kids now starting out of college? Is it different from the way you perceive it?
You know, I I only know this. I feel like when you named the people that you just named, I feel like so much of life, everyone talks about success being, preparation and luck coming together. I feel like the luck I've had in my life of being in rooms, working with, or for however I came to know them, like Alice and Janney, I met because we were at a Super Bowl party together in 1988. And I know the year because the show I was shooting at the time was called Tanner 88. And someone in that show brought me to this Super Bowl party. And I met Allison. And when I tell you that the laughter, like no one, we just laughed. I mean, because neither of us were interested in football, we just found ourselves like fast friends. And then very quickly thereafter ended up like we both were moving out to LA and found each other there again and ended up living together. A lot of things happened when I look back to certain people in my life. I mean, Hickey, I went to school with, and Matt McGrath was there, and Julie White had graduated from Fordham. By the way, Hickey was at Fordham because Julie White, who was also from Texas, had gone to Fordham, and he was like, "Oh, that's a college," and you know what I mean? Like he followed her basically to New York City, and Julie White came back to Fordham uh, to do cabaret with Hickey. He played Cliff after he went on to do it for Sam Mendes on Broadway, obviously.
Wow.
But I first saw him do Cliff, and I had to be stage manager because you know when you're a theater major, you have to do all the jobs at different points. So I stage managed Julie White and John Benjamin Hickey's production of Cabaret at Fordham University in the late '80s. And I think about like Alice. So I guess what I would say is back in the day, and this is still a thing, I think, although then you were a New York actor who went to LA just for pilot season. Now people graduate and go right out to LA and sort of skip the whole let's do really off Broadway shows first in New York before going out to LA. So we were all on this trajectory of do plays for one penny in New York and then try to go get a pilot in LA. And so during pilot season, quote unquote, is when I started to get to know or live with for, you know, we would sublet an apartment together and I lived with Helen Hunt for one pilot season. And at the time she was going out with Matthew Broderick. And that's how I first met Matthew back in the day. And Allison, as I said, we both went out for pilot season at the same time. So there were sort of two things going on. There were like these displaced New Yorkers who would find themselves out in LA and all doing play readings at each other's houses all the time to keep feeling like actors while we went through what we went through. And then Allison called me after her audition for The West Wing and she was like, "Well, I was terrible." And I was like, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry." Not so terrible as it turned out.
Obviously.
Anyway, you know, I think that, as you know, as a theater artist yourself, there's something that happens in dressing rooms. I mean, if I thought drinking out of a baby bottle and doing that for others in a room was intimate, that's sort of what it is to be in a dressing room with people. And as someone who has been doing this for a really long time and has done so many plays, I mean, Broadway was just this miraculous place to also get to work, but there's for every Broadway play there were, you know, 30 plays I did. Naked Angels was a theater company that I got into very early on, and Naked Angels was started and inhabited by people who were not yet famous, like Marissa Tomei and Fisher Stevens and Gina Gershon and our writers. Oh, and Joe Mantello and John Robin Bates and Warren Light and Kenny Lonergan were our playwrights. Like, so when I look at like the people, like I can't believe all of those people went on to just write the most incredible plays that are done all over the world. But that was like our basement. We were, you know, workshopping Sideman. We were, you know, and then Robbie ends up doing Substance of Fire, and Sarah Jessica Parker is in that play, and Ron Riffin. So I could go on and on and on. But I also think, having been a part of a community in New York of Naked Angels, which was an incredible theater company to be a part of. Yeah, and all of us just really kept supporting each other. That's why I have so many guests that I can get to come on my podcast, because that theater company especially was a breeding ground of creativity and friendship and passion.
Do you think that current social media has kind of destroyed that ecosystem a little bit?
I don't know, because as you know, every time we do a podcast and you and I have done 1 million things together, I'm still looking for like the unmute button. Like I am so not intuitive. And you can tell neither are my friends because we'll have like, the Judith Lights and people like that on. And I'm like, Alan, you don't understand. You are not being specific enough. We don't understand what browser means. And you're like, oh my God. So you are part of the world that really deeply understands that. I don't know how communities are formed. I know that when sometimes I'm asked to do like master classes, at the New School or someplace like that, and on like the business of acting, which is hilarious because I really shouldn't speak to that, because I'm not savvy in that way. But I do even remind all those kids in the room every time I go to a college, like, look around this room. This can be, if you want, your first artistic community. And every one of you in this room can help each other make the thing they want to make, right? And so maybe on this one, I'll film it for you and you'll act in it. And then maybe on yours, I'll act in it and you'll film it for me. And maybe the girl, two seats down has an uncle who's like a music producer. And maybe she'll share your beats with it. Like you just never know. So for me, it all happened in a room. But I have friends who have kids who are blowing up in the music business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they've just posted their stuff on YouTube or wherever. So this idea of, I think you can gain traction in on the internet with the thing you make, but I don't know that you build community that way.
That's what I was sort of getting at, because I think with the internet, it's more of building a following, which is not the same as community, because community to me is something that is reliable, supportive, intimate, personal. And, like, would you want to share with all of your followers that you like drinking out of a baby bottle when you come home at the end of your
I
Naked
will
Angels
share that I'm drinking Dunkin'
rehearsals?
right now. I am drinking a Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I know, and I know you know this too, that what has been really incredible to me in the part of my life that is podcasting is, I know that I'm stating the obvious, but people all over the globe listen, right? Like when I started this and you started this, I know it's an obvi, but it was not to me that I would start getting DMs from people in Dubai, Iraq, Barcelona, and Philly, right? Like
Yeah.
really local and really global. And so I also didn't realize how much and how many people have to hide their love or even the fact that they are listening to Broadway musicals because they're only allowed to be listening, if they listen to music at all, to religious music, right? Like we're still living in a world. So what I would say is when we talk about followers or community, as opposed to someone you're making something with, it's been really beautiful to me to see the way that these podcasts, these conversations become a safe space for other people to share with me, with you, with all of us who are a part of the Broadway Podcast Network and other places, secrets that they can't share, their sexuality, it's so complex. So I don't know how to divide it up into like followers versus real life friends versus collaborators, but I do know that there's been a really beautiful space that's opened up for me to be able to be in communication with people who in some ways feel like they know me because they've listened to hundreds of episodes, and feel like I might understand or be compassionate or open to whatever they're going through. And maybe that's the part of me that went to that first acting class and was not judgmental of what I was watching, but fascinated and empathetic and wondered what happened to this person when she was young, that's still her comfort, right? Like as an adult person. I do feel really lucky that I grew up in a time where people called each other on the phone and had
Yeah.
really long conversations with each other. And met in coffee shops and late night drinks after shows and sat and talked for hours about the thing we just saw. rather than just tweeting about it or posting a picture of the playbill in front of the set, to promote it. So it's like, I get why your question is sort of open ended in a way, because I've had just the unique fortune in my life to come into contact through job after job or friends of people that I met on a job, and have had really long lasting, deep friendships for years and years now. And part of that is also I stayed in one place. Like I've been, I didn't move to another country. I've been here. I'm right
Mm-hmm.
here. We've all kind of stayed here. We're in New York,
Yeah,
or
New York
LA, New
is
York, I should
arguably
say.
the center of the world,
Yeah,
for
well,
more or
it's
less.
arguably the center of my world. And in some ways, my
Definitely the
world is
center of your
very
world.
small. Yeah.
Well,
But I
in
just want to
20
say, just to go back, by the way, to the Naked Angels thing, the reason I got into Naked Angels is I did summer stock the summer before I got into Naked Angels. And I did a play that was directed, non union, non-ec, by Michael Greif. And
wow.
Michael and I became great friends. And he's like, oh, I'm going to go direct this play at this theater company called Naked Angels that my friend asked me to do. Do you want to do it? And so again, like that's just crazy. And that became Michael Greif, like who we owe so much to in terms of rent and other things that we love. So I don't know, had I not done that, get paid $1 to do the Berkshire Theater Festival, like it all is about saying yes to things because you just never know.
What's one of the weirdest things you have said yes to where you're in the moment like, this is really odd? And then looking back on it, it's been this major crossroads that took you to an amazing place.
Wow, that's such a good question. I mean, I think back when I first started out, I assume this still goes on in the world. I was in New York, and I'd go to like the Columbia University or NYU. I'd go to these bulletin boards and see if anyone was doing a student film, right? And I did many of them. That is how I learned how to be on camera, doing these not indie films, student films.
Student
Um,
films.
like yeah. And we're talking like it's 4 a.m. and we are freezing in some neighborhood that I couldn't even find again if I tried. And it felt a little scary and a little dangerous, and it's freezing. And so there were a couple of moments during shoots like that where I was like, where am I? And what am I doing? Um, but none of those turned into anything except incredible friendships, great times, and like some pretty good movies. And so one of them turned into my demo reel. Like I didn't have anything. And that reel, which was one movie, not a reel, became something that my agent could show to Robert Altman's producer slash casting director. And it all started for me, with Bob Altman, because Cynthia Nixon starred in that series with me, Pamela Reed, Michael Murphy, Daniel Jenkins, Kevin J. O'Connor, all of these incredible people. And that's how I got my first show. So it was
Wow.
scary. And I thought at one point I almost got killed, like I almost got run over. I had to do this thing on the tracks and almost got hit by a train, like crazy stuff that no one should have done. But it ended up to be a piece of film that was really useful later on. So
So,
that
so, so
comes
you're
to
saying you got
mind.
stunt pay for your student film, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
in 2016, though, you enter into the podcast universe with little known
Hmm.
facts, and 2016 even it was not that long ago, but in the podcast world, it seems like it's 3,000 years ago because podcast all of
Yeah.
a sudden just like peaked in 2020 with the pandemic, and it just like 2018 I think is when it really caught on, and you were ahead of the curve, and you've got what is it? As we're recording this right now, you've got 351 episodes public on iTunes right now. That's insane,
Yeah.
insanely cool. Like, why did you were saying too that you're sort of not into tech and don't understand it. So where did this idea even come from? How did you start getting into podcast land?
So at the time, I listened to Terry Gross on NPR. That was, I would say, in my ears, the only interview radio show that I kind of knew. And Mark Maron had already been doing WTF. Um, and so in terms of my awareness of what something like this looked like, felt like, sounded like, they were like the two people I'd ever heard in my ears. Um, a friend of mine came to me and told me that he was investing in a podcast, in a booth, basically in the world of podcasting, specifically the booth, the engineer, all of that stuff. He was partnering in a business. It was called Hanger Studios at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had seen a bunch of people in and out of this studio making content. And he was like, every time I'm with you, I find myself telling you something I haven't even told my wife. Like there's something about you that I find myself opening up about all sorts of things. And I think you would be great at hosting a podcast. It was just based on his experience with me. And I had just, this is not a new concept, the power of yes, but I just decided that I was going to say yes to new types of creative opportunities that came to me if they were safe and okay for me physically, emotionally.
Didn't
and,
require
and
train stunts. Yeah.
trade stunts
Yeah.
and, wouldn't put me or my family in harm's way. And you know this, like you have kids, and so suddenly the things that you do, you choose really carefully. And so for me, where I ended up in my career, having done the number of shows I'd done, is getting offers to do amazing plays all the time, not in New York City.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
I would have to fight and claw for great parts in New York, and they would come along sometimes, but constantly like, oh my God, that's an amazing play in New Haven, right?
Right.
Like it was, so I was sort of thinking, like, how can I tell stories or be around this world that I love so much and not go to New Haven for, 6 weeks at a time. So I just said yes, and I didn't know what it was going to be. But as I said, I knew Mark Maron's show, and so many people I knew had been on his podcast, and I kind of, his thing is leading with his sobriety, and he talks a lot about himself, and I really love his show, and it was very inspirational to me. But I sort of used his show a little bit as a template, minus the me of it all. I mean, Mark shares a lot of himself, and I found myself much less interesting than he is and thought I'm just going to shine my light on my guests. And the first person I bumped into, who's an old friend of mine also, is John Slattery. And so I told him I was doing this, and he's like, "Oh, come on." And so he was my guinea pig, and he's my first episode, and we laughed so much. And when we were done, he was like, "Ilana, I've done a lot of these." Mad Men had just finished, and he was, I don't know, he probably had clocked in more interviews, than most people we know. And he was like, "You remind me of Howard Stern." And I thought that's such a funny thing for him to say. And he's like, "What I meant by that is I felt like so safe the entire time. Like I was with someone who was very seasoned at this, even though you hadn't done it before. I didn't know where the conversation was going to go, but I felt completely safe and comfortable going wherever you wanted us to go." And that was such an incredible, bolstering thing to hear. Like that's pretty awesome feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to keep going. And I have to be honest, because John did it, then I was like, "Can I tell people you did it?" Because it wasn't out yet.
Right.
And ask other people. He's like, are you kidding? Of course. And then it just went from there. And then like Uma Thurman's assistant ended up loving the podcast and told her to come on. And then, there were all these weird ways in which my earlier guests came on the show, but it just started with Slatty, and it just kept going.
Slatty. I love that.
Yeah.
Everyone's
Yes.
got a hickey, slatty.
Yes, no one. Who's got time to say the entire name? Life moves very fast.
No, I
Yes.
I love it, and I guess myself too. What are we doing now? This is going to be in the 250s, right, for me on my podcast. And so I'm now getting to the point where I'm having some repeat guests because they've come back around to do another Broadway show or whatever. Is that
Yeah.
do you stay away from that from repeat guests, or do you encourage it? And
I
you're
have stayed
nodding,
away
yeah.
from it, but the one person who has come back a lot compared to others, and we did like a roast recently during COVID. We did a family roast where we all had to like roast each other at home one night, my kids and my husband and I. And my husband had us all like on the floor dying about how many times Ben Platt has been on my show, whether it was a live show or the show or with Beanie or with Lucas, like the number of times. And I could not be more grateful. And he's just been such an amazing support. And then because of him, Zoe Deutsch and all these other people came on that he's friends with, and then Noah, his fiance, broke their engagement news on my podcast, and they sort of thought about that in a very thoughtful way where they wanted that to happen. So I would say Ben is someone who's come on more than once, and I don't think that's happened with anyone else, although it would be fine. There's crossover with the Tony podcast that we do, of
Yeah,
course. Um,
it's different
but that's the
subjects.
beauty of having a lot of podcasts. You can rotate people around in different ways.
Right. Well, okay, so little known facts is like a resume rundown. That's sort of what I would loosely call it. And then how to be more chill is you and Sam Mayer. Um Literally like diving into the Be More Chill fandom, which I think again, you could have somebody talk just for hours about Be More Chill, and
Yeah.
then and the award goes to, which I think is wonderful. And for those who don't know, we're halfway through season 3 now, and you always start every episode by, if they allow it, if they're comfortable, allowing
Yeah.
them to watch their acceptance speech, their Tony acceptance speech, or in the case of Alice and Janney, their Oscar
Or
acceptance
Oscar
speech.
speech, yeah.
Um, which for most of them, I'm finding they haven't watched since they gave it. They've never watched it. And then it
Right.
opens up at this 30 to 60-minute conversation about that moment and things that they've never talked about again. To your point, they're opening up to you in a way that they just don't talk about. Why, where did that idea ever come from? Because I remember you approached me about the idea to start the podcast.
Yeah. Someone had come to me, it was during the pandemic and everything had shut down. The Tonys were not going to be presented. And I can't remember anymore who I was talking to, but it sparked this idea in me. Oh, I know. It harkens back to my telling you about people from all over the world reaching out to us uh, who can't go see a Broadway show because they live 7,000 miles away, right? So I think in talking to someone, I realized like the Tonys are, we look at it, it's very meta, right? Like this is a celebration where our community comes together and sort of highlights the incredible work of the season, right? Like we look at it as like this very personal thing. For so many people in the world, that is the only way they get to see even a snippet of a Broadway
Hmm.
musical, right? Like those production numbers at the Tonys, those speeches open up all kinds of conversations for people at home with their own families. There's so much inspiration and aspiration, and it's it's so emotional on so many levels. And so not having that was going to really rob people globally of this touchstone for them, like their way into this thing that they can't physically be a part of, but they can celebrate it one night a year. So I thought, what can I do? I mean, there were lots of things going on that year of people trying to figure out how to celebrate the Tonys. There was also a lot of conversation around what the Tonys need to become, right? It was also very political that first year and what changes had to happen. And so my thing was, let's look at very specific moments, like let's make it very small. Let's make it very personal because the bigger conversation continues, but I can create entertainment and love around this moment for these actors who, whatever you think of the Tonys and whatever the Tonys will become and continue to morph into, it was meaningful to every single one of these winners in very different ways. So that was
Yeah,
the catalyst or the idea. And
being
also
being here
what
in New
we've learned, wait, Alan, what I just want to say is now it's all I want to do. Like you and I don't have to ask a single question. Literally, like just playing that speech, we could walk away and come back an hour later
Yep.
because the stream of consciousness for these beautiful artists around that night, it does all the work for us, I guess is what I want to say about
It's
the format.
incredible. I think
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to the season 3 opener with Julie Taymor, right? Like she talked for an hour about Lion King, and like immediately when the speech is over, she got teary because at the end she mentioned somebody who had recently passed
Her
away, and
father.
you're
Yeah.
getting you're getting all of these memories and triggering this elation, this emotional roller coaster that like we were saying, they probably haven't lived through again in such a long time. And we're on the other side of this global shutdown
Yeah.
where our industry, our livelihood was put on unknown pause. We didn't know
Yeah.
when it was going to come back or how it was going to come back. And I just love it. I really do love the podcast, and it's so much
It's
fun
been so
to
fun
produce
doing
it
it
and
with you. Yeah.
to listen to you talk to these people. I absolutely love it. So
I do
thank
too.
you.
It's
Yeah.
been, I'm just so glad it keeps going and it's become something, even though the Tonys are back on, it's just been so gratifying to get to hear these stories and share these stories and also to go back, like it's not just, we have Matt Doyle who won 5 minutes ago, but then, yeah, to have Ruben Santiago Hudson, like people, all of these people for whom, or BD, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, M. Butterfield, that's a long time ago now. And so
History making
seeing,
wins.
yeah, and sort of how, and the evolution for them as artists from that time and what it's opened up for them and what didn't change because of it. Like I remember when Roger Bart won his Tony for Charlie Brown, he then, you kind of do the Hollywood victory lap. You bring your Tony out to Hollywood and it's supposedly opening these new doors for theater people and like that he just came back like the number of times people are like I heard you want a cute little like just the he's like, yes, it's adorable. And he's gone on to do such remarkable
Look, it
things, but
spins.
right, like they didn't care. They didn't care. So also like, oh, I guess it doesn't really change things in the way it changes billing for sure for future Broadway shows, but it doesn't always come with what we think it comes with as well. You still have to just work so hard. That's the thing of all these conversations. It's like, I mean, we just had Harvey on, like, Harvey Firestein works as hard today as he did when he was just starting out trying to write stuff and get it done at La Mama. Like,
Hmm.
like the work ethic is what blows me away. Just blows me away every time. It's just really inspiring.
I think a lot of this is it's a community of people. This goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. I think that you have fallen into this community of people who have um, the work ethic and the drive. And I want to sort of equate this to imposter syndrome in a way because they're like, why me? I don't deserve this. I'm just going to keep going because eventually I might feel like I'm supposed to be here. But you and your friends are all like you don't stop. That's what I was saying about you're still going. You're still there. You're all successful because it doesn't occur to you to stop. This is just who you are.
I guess that's true. And also, I mean, the thing that happened early on was I had the unique joy and privilege of making stuff with people I loved.
Mm.
And that is, I mean, talk about a drug that you get addicted to make things, some of them awful, some of them incredible, right? But to try to be up at bat over and over again with people who I think were always smarter than me and more talented than me, and that I aspired to be like, or just learn from them. I mean, I've always been a sponge, and yeah, I think for me that's been the thing I've chased always, to get to work on really, I mean, when it's great writing, it's the most fantastic feeling in the world, but with people you also love, and to have that safe room and safe space to fail with. And that's what's incredible when you work with directors, even, that you don't know. I mean, I think that's the dream, like being so feeling so safe and taken care of that you can make really huge mistakes in the work, right? Hopefully in the rehearsal room, and not when you're on, when the Times is there, but yeah, like to just fail beautifully over and over again. And I think all of the people that have, remained part of this incredible family, and it is an incredible family, and there were meeting places, like, after your show, if you went to Joe Allen's, all your friends would be there. And now it's Bar Center. I mean, the places have changed, and the younger kids, I think, go to the Glass House Tavern, right? There's new meeting places. But West Bank Cafe was a clubhouse that you knew you could go to. And what's been really kind of amazing, even though COVID keeps circling back in all these different ways, is knowing that at any given night, if you walked into any one of these clubhouses, you're going to see someone who feels like family to you. Like, that's a really incredible feeling. And so you never feel like an outsider. Like, you always have a place to go. It's a
That,
really remarkable thing.
yeah, that's something that people have always said about theater. It's that it's your chosen family. When you don't have a real family that is accepting of you for whatever reason, you're gonna have someone. We keep going back to the
Yeah.
bottle, coming home and drinking out of a baby bottle, right? People are gonna accept you.
And that girl was me, Alan. That girl was me. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now she's on this podcast.
Now, look at me now. No, but yes, or geographically, like, you're just, most people who are in the theater didn't grow up in New York, right? I mean,
Right.
it is, it's a big risk that people take, and they move across the country or the world to come do it. Anyway, yeah, and then the podcast world has opened up this whole new community to me, including you and the great Dory Bernstein, who just is the most generous spirit as well, and has made a home for all of us, the two of you, to kind of have a platform to share these stories. It's that's another beautiful community, what you guys have done, truly,
Just
at Broadway
amplifying.
Podcast Network.
Thank
It's
you.
remarkable, the amount of content that you guys have, and the support and the foundation that you give all of us who want to do it. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not good at taking compliments. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, okay, so that is a wonderful place to switch to my three standard closing questions to end every episode. The first one, just very
Okay.
simply, is what motivates you?
Connecting. Connecting. I like connecting.
I love that. Okay, what advice would you give
Yeah.
to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
Focus on doing the work. Just do the work. Don't get distracted. Don't look at other people's trajectory, because it happens really fast for some people. It takes a really long time for other people. And it's really hard not to compare yourself. I mean, it's so, no matter what we're doing, it's so hard. I found that true as a parent. I mean, it hasn't even mattered professional or personal. So just stick to your own inner compass and your gut, and just keep doing the work.
That's beautiful. Okay, last question, hardest one. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
I guess it would probably be Sunday in the Park with George.
Ooh, I love
I
that.
mean, it's not the most original answer, but it has everything I need.
It is a beautiful show. I really love it. All right, where can we find you online?
So on Instagram, I'm Little Known Facts Podcast. But really, if you just go to littleknownfactspodcast.com, every @ is there and all the things I'm doing are there. And I think that's a good place to go.
I agree. All right, you can get more of me on I don't even know where I am. I'm like
Where
TikTok,
are you?
TikTok. I am on TikTok, Facebook,
You are
Twitter.
on TikTok.
I am on the TikToks. I don't know
You're
what I'm
everywhere.
I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm out there.
I
Fine.
joined you there. It doesn't matter. Even if we just follow each other. I'm entertained. I appreciate what
I
you're
gotta get
doing.
over the whole thing of like putting my face out there. It's just weird. It's weird to me. Anyway, leave a rating, leave a review wherever you're listening now. It helps people spread the word. Everybody go listen to Little Known Facts podcast. Listen to And the Award Goes To podcast. Listen to How to Be More Chill podcast. And of course, more theater podcast. Thank you to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music. Ilana, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we have finally gotten to do this. It's long overdue.
Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.